Our speaker today graduated cum laude from Wabash College in 1999 with a BA in religion. He received the Frank Hughes Sparks All-Around Achievement Award and was the IAWM Student Athlete of the Year. After Wabash, he completed a Master of Divinity degree from Emory University's School of Theology and has been serving as the Assistant Director of Admissions at Wabash since July 2008. With a chapel talk entitled Leisure and Liberal Arts, The Value of Intellectus, please welcome Kim King.
Thanks, Sphinx Club, for granting me the opportunity to offer this chapel talk. And I thank you too, Wabash community, for having chosen to share in this talk. This talk, as has been said, I've chosen to call Leisure and Liberal Arts, the Value of Intellectus. I thank you for being here, but I also thank you for encouraging me to go through with this. Members of the admissions staff have reminded me that I'd be fine. Time will tell. Rudy Ottergott is responsible, I'm sure, for a sizable portion of the independents who are present. On that note, I'd like to let you know, Rudy, that if this thing fails, you gotta get my back. The coaching staff has encouraged me in its own way. I think Coach Stevens asked me if I would give him a shout out. I'm not that cool. Gary and Sherry Ross comforted me by sharing their own experiences. John Dewar told me in true to form that he'd be right here in front. To you, John, I also issue a word of caution. Watch for the tomatoes Coach Gilbert promised to throw. For all of this, I'm thankful. But before I get too effusive, I probably should set the stage for what brings me here in the first place. After the homecoming football game of this past season, I deliberately seized the opportunity to check on a few students in the spirit of Wabash collegiality. And when I say Wabash collegiality, I don't mean the simple, I'm here just to be your friend type. Instead, my intention was to engage a few Wallies in the spirit that's open to learning about life itself, where, if nothing else, I would learn some things about current life as a Wally, and they some things about one alum's path to Wabash as a student and back as a professional. This type of engagement at its best is often typified by having dinner at your professor's on a random evening, and in the process realizing that one honestly personal conversation illumines the layers of thought and genuine interest in any given subject. In fact, I can't help but to digress in a brief moment and refer to a point the late Bill Plaker made in his sesquicentennial speech. Ever more eloquently, he captures what I'm trying to convey by having said this. Again and again, in studying the early history of Wabash, one reads of efforts to inculcate manners and civilized behavior into frontier boys. These efforts were variously judged. Faculty members sometimes despaired of the young barbarians in their charge, while more than a few townspeople darkly suspected these academic types of trying to make honest Hoosier lads way too effete. Nevertheless, a kind of acculturation, and this is the point, a kind of acculturation process that reached far beyond the classroom early became a part of the Wabash tradition, acculturation. So, with this type of collegiality in mind, I meandered, amongst a few other places, over to the Beta House. And let me add parenthetically that the Beta House is one of the three houses that, except for a few coincidences, I might have pledged all those years ago, some 15 if I remember correctly. Once there, I found Will Hoffman and a few other upperclassmen. Now, for sure, some of the collegiality, okay, to be honest, most of the collegiality devolved in the form of banter. For example, I explained how on Saturday afternoons in the fall, I never knew whether I was encountering Coach Gilbert, the All-American defensive tackle, or Coach Gilbert, the professional wrestler called Ultimate Warrior. The mild-mannered, though intense Coach Gilbert, many of you know today, was the face painting before games Jeff Gilbert I knew over 10 years ago. And Coach Gilbert, I didn't just pick on you. I actually told a story about Coach Carpenter. I explained how Coach Johnson tricked, and I do mean tricked, Coach Carpenter, who was a bona fide basketball player, into running track. And while the trickery itself is humorous in its own right, what's more funny is that you could read off of Coach Carpenter that he was indeed tricked. In the very first meet of his sophomore year, Coach Carpenter took off his warm-up gear, and I swear, I thought he was getting ready to go to basketball practice. Seriously, picture this. You're watching 6 to 8 guys mentally run down their race at the start of the 100-meter dash. They're all wearing, the sleek aerodynamic singlet, the ones that, sprinters wear. Then there's Coach Carpenter in baggy basketball shorts and a tank top. He's not staring down the track, running his race mentally like the others. Instead, he's laughing at us as we laugh back at him. Now, all jokes aside, he was a gifted enough athlete that he finished no worse than third at that meet, wearing the wrong gear and not even being in track shape. So those were admittedly some of the digressions, some of the banter. But in the midst of this banter, and I probably need to stop with these two stories because the others might incriminate me, and Dean Klein is in the back. Amidst this banter, we shared vulnerable stories too. For example, I saw in Chase Holtum's senior eyes the very competitiveness I saw in the eyes of my fellow seniors when we competed over 10 years ago. And as Will talked about leadership skills he's developed by working with the Sphinx Club, I could see other members from that class of 1999 who took their leadership skills to business, politics, law, and countless other fields. Out of the few minutes at being at the Beta House, I began to witness the powerful nexus of generational lives crossing, a known phenomenon of Wabash mystique. And so, it is out of this more vulnerable spirit that I offer my talk today. I'm here because I want to offer what I hope is insight into that acculturation process, the one that reaches far beyond the classroom. I've chosen to talk about the process this way, and this will be the point of my talk today. If our goal is to impact life as participants in this human condition and be impacted by life in the process, we must learn to value leisure as much, if not more, as we do the busyness of our everyday lives. Now, for us to make sense of this, let me flesh out what I mean by leisure. To begin, leisure is not simply defined by that break in time when one is relieved from the duties at hand. To quote Joseph Piper in his book, Leisure, The Basis of Culture, leisure is not simply the result of external factors. It is not the inevitable result of spare time, a holiday, a weekend, or a vacation. So, as much as we enjoyed recess as grade school students, for example, this time spent in play is not the leisure I'm trying to define today. Not even the breaks of college, fall break, winter break, spring break. Not one of these breaks constitutes leisure in and of itself. To reiterate Piper's point, not even the family vacation, the one you find yourself taking only once a year, can be considered leisure by the fact itself. To make the final point about what doesn't constitute leisure, even the ultimate goal of retirement finds itself devoid of this concept in the way that I want to define it. If I may summarize the significance of this negative side of leisure, it's the following sentence. Leisure is not regularly found in college breaks or family vacations, and surely not in grade school recess. Precisely because leisure used in these ways is only designed to reinvigorate us to get back to the task at hand. Stated more contextually, winter recess for our college student is used at best to recover from first semester and to prepare for the second. Leisure in this conventional sense is merely a stopgap measure, a mere means to a simple end. By the end of this talk, my hope is that we will understand why leisure, properly defined, has much more depth than time spent for recovery and preparation. Spending the time to explain that leisure is not simply defined by external factors, as with how we conventionally use our breaks or holidays. I hope we begin to become receptive to the idea that leisure, especially as it pertains to Western thought, has strong philosophical and metaphysical roots. And while I cannot exhaust these metaphysical roots in time or talent, I can at least tip this point off by observing that the very English word school is derived from the word leisure in its Greek form. In the strictest sense, when we say that we are going to school, we are saying that we are going to leisure. This etymological relationship between leisure and school is the first connection between leisure and liberal arts. Still, for the sake of talking about this connection more robustly, I want to highlight a few more points about the nature of leisure, aside, of course, from its origins. Above all else, leisure must be starkly contrasted against the workday world. The workday world lies antithetically to leisure because it's a world totally defined by servile work. And servile work has little to do with specific trades as it does with the overwhelming effect that total work can have on our lives. Let's pretend for the moment that being a student is a profession. A student's life becomes servile work when the student allows, for example, the measurable end of writing papers to define what it means to be a student as such. In other words, once the student loses himself in writing paper after paper, as if writing papers were the defining character of what it means to be a student, that student has become lost in the workday world, in the world of servile work. To summarize this point, let me quote again Piper. To be fettered to work means to be bound to this vast utilitarian process in which our needs are satisfied, and what is more, tied to such an extent that the life of the working person is wholly consumed in it. Stated, hopefully, a more pertinent way, servile work stifles the very nature of learning. Here again, it's useful to use Piper's language to make the point, for he distinguishes between ratio and intellectus. Ratio, he explains, is the power of discursive, logical thought, of searching and of examination, of abstraction, of definition and drawing conclusions. Intellectus, on the other hand, is the name for understanding insofar it has the capacity of simple intuition, of that simple vision to truth as is offered like a landscape to the eye. Here it needs to be noted, truth is synonymous with a much broader concern for learning, where learning is not primarily concerned with function, as with a student writing a paper. Instead, truth involves that type of learning which involves the totality of a given subject, indeed, the whole of a person. In short, ratio is to servile work what intellectus is to liberal arts. And this shapes the second connection between leisure and liberal arts. This second connection between liberal arts and leisure might be stated this way. Leisure is really a disposition whose understanding deals more with the fullness of things than with the dissection of its parts. This is another way of talking about, of course, what it means to receive a liberal education. And as we know, this type of education is part and parcel to what it means to be a Wabash man. To drive this point home, allow me to return to Plaker's sesquicentennial speech, where he writes, quote, "A commitment to some moral values, to honesty, to open-mindedness, and a degree of tolerance, to caring about human individuals. All of this is built into the nature of what we do here at Wabash." Hopefully, my talk so far on leisure may be summarized by this. Leisure has very little to do with how we are especially what we do by way of inactivity or conventional vacation. Instead, it has everything to do with who we become through the process of learning. In this light, we might ask ourselves, for example, whether we chose to be narrowly preoccupied with satisfying a language requirement, that's ratio, or more fundamentally involved with learning about foreign ways of seeing others and seeing ourselves as a way of participating in this human condition in ever more nuanced ways. This is Intellectus. Better yet, seniors, did you answer by rote in your oral exams? Or did you incorporate things you've learned about yourself and about life in general? Before I bring this all to a close, let me just say a little bit more about leisure as it pertains to Intellectus. I hope it's clear that the disposition of leisure involves a bit of the philosophizing life, though one not need be a philosopher by profession. In fact, this philosophizing spirit simply calls forth, as Piper observes, the fact that our immediate surroundings, prescribed as they are by aims and needs of this life, must be broken in upon, not only once, but ever again, by the disturbing call of the world, indeed, of the whole world. This observation is important because it too calls forth certain minor dispositions. First, it recognizes that in leisure, we live in wonder. By virtue of the intellect and with respect to the revelations through time, we seem to know more half-truths, as it were. Just the other day, for example, I myself was once more awestruck by a relatively new argument in the world of science. A scholar has argued in a book, The Hidden Brain, that we're not even aware of many of the decisions we make, not least of which for hiring and voting. Go figure. Aside from wonder, this philosophizing life also recognizes, and this is the second minor disposition, that a life of leisure abides in hope. This hope derives from the concern it has for the harmony of all things, but also from knowing that the intellectus always leaves room for that which is yet to come, for that which has not yet revealed itself, like the workings of the hidden brain. And so I say definitively, Wabash, that our capacity to having thrived as a vibrant liberal arts institution has resulted from our capacity to celebrate leisure in this deepest sense. And as I've suggested, liberal arts surely inculcates the leisurely disposition, at least in part, for this again is what it means to be liberally trained. Still, I can't help but to wonder whether leisure need be celebrated most acutely through some of our traditions. Chapel, all by itself, speaks volumes. Is it not here, precisely in this time and space, set apart from the workday life of papers and exams, that we are confronted with our most ambitious forms of hope, where we are confronted to be Wabash men, not ordinary students, passionate faculty, not just research technocrats, and far-seeing administrators, not just bottom-line automatons. And what about emerging learning? Is this not a time when you practice Intellectus equally tangibly? As you're taking in new cultures, redefining the way you understand the world and yourself, and coming back not merely refreshed, but reoriented. The same could be said for study abroad. And I've said nothing of CNT and freshman tutorial. Surely they are closely connected to leisure, to seeking the deeper truths of learning, of being, of life. In the words of Bill Plaker, I finished. It might indeed only take one lawyer in a small town to help the unpopular defendant get a fair trial. Only one doctor one scientist in a research team to help raise questions about human values. Only one business exec, one union leader, one social worker to bring imagination to bear and find a new way of solving a problem. Only one journalist or public official to expose the public's business to full public scrutiny. Only one poet or artist to help us see the world anew all around us. If this be the case, if we are to become one of the courageous few, and I say this especially to our seniors, I challenge us to open our lives in ways for leisure to abound abundantly, for the intellectus to be in full bloom, so that we can be amongst a few who are truly educated enough anyway, to make a difference. Thank you.